Somewhere out there is a version of you that already won. Same face, same name, completely different life. The only difference between you and him is what he did on the days nobody was watching. Winning was never about talent. It was never about luck, timing, or which family you were born into. Winning is a version of you, and that version already exists, waiting on the other side of decisions you haven't made yet. The big challenge in life isn't out there. It isn't the economy, your competition, or your circumstances. The big challenge is to become all that you have the possibility of becoming. Say that back to yourself if you need to, because everything else in this video is just an explanation of that one line. Ask yourself something honest. How many times have you told yourself, once things calm down, I'll start. Once I feel motivated, I'll begin. Once I have more time, more money, more energy, I'll finally become that version of me. That day doesn't arrive on its own. It never has, for anyone. The version of you that wins isn't waiting for the right conditions. He's making the decision inside the wrong ones. A river doesn't carve a canyon by flooding once. It carves it by running the same path, day after day, for longer than anyone alive was around to witness the beginning. From a distance, nothing looks like it's happening. Underneath, the rock is losing a fraction of an inch it will never get back. That is what your daily choices are doing to you right now, in one direction or the other. You are either carving towards something, or you're being worn down by nothing in particular. So why do so many people stay the exact same version of themselves for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years? It's rarely because they lack the ability to change, and it's rarely because the opportunity never showed up. They stay the same because change asks for something today, and the reward doesn't arrive until much later, and most people won't pay a price they can't see the return on immediately. That's the entire gap between the version of you that wins and the version of you that just watches. One pays now and collects later. The other wants to collect now and ends up paying for it later, usually with interest. There's an old line that still holds up after everything changes around it. We must all suffer one of two things: the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. Discipline is heavy on a Tuesday morning. Regret is heavy for the rest of your life. You don't get to skip both. You only get to choose which one you're willing to carry. Think about what that means in practice. Discipline asks you to get up when the alarm goes off the first time. Regret doesn't ask you for anything today. It just waits, quietly, until you're 40 and wondering what would have happened if you had started at 25. One of those cost you 20 minutes. The other one cost you years you can't get refunded. There's a voice that shows up right around the moment you decide to change something. And it rarely sounds like an enemy. It sounds reasonable. It tells you this isn't the right week to start. That you're tired for a good reason. That you can pick it back up once things settle down. That voice isn't lying about the difficulty. It's just applying it to the wrong side of the ledger. It never mentions what staying exactly the same is going to cost you over the next 10 years. Only what changing is going to cost you this week. A fair trade requires looking at both prices, not just the one that's due today. Anyone can run the first mile of a marathon. The crowd is loud, the legs are fresh, there's music in your headphones and adrenaline doing half the work for you. Nobody drops out at mile 1. They drop out around mile 20. When the crowd thins out, the legs are gone, and the only thing left running the race is whatever they built long before they ever laced up their shoes. Winning gets decided in training. It just gets revealed out on the road, in front of everyone. At the exact moment there's nowhere left to hide. Notice something else about that mile 20 moment. It has nothing to do with motivation. Motivation got everyone to the starting line. It doesn't get anyone to the finish. If you have an idiot and you motivate him, now you have a motivated idiot. Hype without direction just makes you move faster in whatever direction you were already pointed. And most people are pointed nowhere in particular. The version of you that wins isn't the one who feels the most fired up on a Monday. He's the one who still shows up on the Thursday when the fire's gone out, and nobody would blame him for skipping it. So what builds the version of you that wins, quietly, long before anyone is watching? Start with the people around you, because this one gets ignored more than almost anything else. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. That's not an insult to anyone in your circle. It's just math, and math doesn't care about your feelings. Look at the 5 people you talk to the most. If every conversation ends in complaints about the economy, the job, the traffic, the way things used to be, you are training your own mind to expect nothing better than that. Nobody is exempt from that math, including you, and including me. This doesn't mean cut everyone off tomorrow. It means notice what you're absorbing. Notice whether the people closest to you talk about problems or about solutions, about what happened to them, or about what they're going to do next. Borrow their standards for a while if your own aren't high enough yet. Standards are contagious. in both directions. The same idea applies to what you put into your own head when nobody else is around. Formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. Nobody is coming to hand the version of you that wins a syllabus. You build him out of the books you actually finish, the hard conversations you don't avoid, the skill you practice on a Tuesday night instead of collapsing in front of a screen. None of that gets applauded. It gets compounded. Quietly at first, then all at once, years later, when someone calls it an overnight success. Now think about growth you can't see happening. A pearl starts as an irritation. Something rough gets inside an oyster that was never supposed to be there. And instead of that being the end of the story, the oyster coats it, layer after layer, for years, with absolutely nothing to show for it on the outside. Then one day somebody cracks it open and finds something worth more than the shell that made it. Your hardest season right now is doing the exact same thing to you, whether you can feel it happening or not. The layers are forming. Nobody sees them from the outside, including you, most days. That doesn't mean they're not there. It means you're being asked to trust a process you can't audit yet. While that's forming, resist the urge to measure yourself against somebody else's timeline. Everyone started at a different depth, with a different set of storms, at a different age. Comparing your third year of effort to somebody else's 10th, and calling yourself behind isn't honest. It's just a bad measurement. The only fair comparison is the one nobody else can see. Are you sharper than you were a year ago? Steadier under pressure than you were 6 months ago? Keeping more promises to yourself than you were last week? That's the only scoreboard that was ever accurate. Everything else is just noise borrowed from someone else's life. Most people don't quit on day one. They quit around the point where the work has already started changing them, but the results haven't shown up yet to prove it was worth it. That gap between the change and the proof is where almost everyone gives up. Not because they were wrong to start, but because they measured the wrong thing at the wrong time and mistook silence for failure. Muscle doesn't get stronger during the workout. It actually tears a little, on purpose, under load. The strength shows up 2 days later, while you're resting, while the body is quietly repairing what you broke deliberately. If you only judged the workout by how you felt walking out of the gym, you'd think nothing happened. The real work happens after you leave, in the dark, unpaid and unwatched. That's just how the system is built to work. The big challenge is to become all that you have the possibility of becoming. Not the loudest version. Not the version that looks good in the first week. The version that's still showing up in month 11. When nobody's asking how the goal is going anymore because everyone assumed you quietly gave up on it like they did on theirs. There are two versions of you having a quiet argument right now, and most people never even notice it's happening. One version wants the easier 5 minutes. Sleep in, skip the call, push it to Monday. The other version wants the life that 5 minutes was going to cost him. They can't both win. Every single day, one of them gets to run your life a little more, and the other loses a little more ground. You don't notice the shift on any single day. You notice it 2 years later, when you look at where you are and realize which one has been winning. There's a blunt line worth keeping close for exactly this kind of moment. If you really want to do something, you'll find a way. If you don't, you'll find an excuse. Most people aren't short on time. They're short on wanting it badly enough to make the time. That sentence stings a little the first time you hear it, because it removes every excuse in one move. It's supposed to. A ship crossing an ocean is almost never sitting exactly on course. Wind pushes it one way, current pulls it another. What actually gets it to the destination isn't one perfect line drawn at the start. It's 1,000 small corrections, made over and over, each one too small for anyone watching to call dramatic. That's what becoming the version of you that wins looks like from the inside. Not one heroic turn. 1,000 boring corrections nobody will ever put in a highlight reel, made on ordinary days that don't feel like they belong in any story at all. Every win people eventually notice from the outside was paid for on the inside, long before it was visible. Nobody claps for the version of you that got up at 5 for 2 straight years. They clap for whatever that 5 a.m. eventually turned into. By the time it's visible enough to earn applause, the hardest part of the bill has already been paid, in full, mostly in silence, by a version of you who didn't get to enjoy any of the recognition yet because there wasn't any recognition to enjoy. That's just the order the invoice arrives in. Discipline first, applause much later if it comes at all. Usually for somebody who's already moved on to the next thing. Somebody once put the whole idea in a single sentence that's outlasted almost everything written around it. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Not motivation, not talent, not luck. A bridge, built one plank at a time. Out of decisions nobody applauds while you're making them, and nobody remembers except you. on the day you finally reach the other side. That bridge cost something concrete. It cost the extra hour you'd rather spend scrolling. It cost the version of the conversation where you tell the truth instead of the comfortable version. It cost showing up to the gym on the day you have a perfectly good excuse not to. None of that feels significant in the moment. All of it adds up to the difference between the person who talked about change and the person who became it. None of this requires seeing the whole distance at once, which is good, because you can't. You can only ever see the next plank. Lay that one down, then the next one. The bridge gets built exactly one decision at a time, by someone who stopped waiting to see the far side before agreeing to start walking. The big challenge is to become all that you have the possibility of becoming. Read that one more time. By now you know why it keeps coming back around in this video. It's the whole argument, said one way after another, from every angle, until it finally lands somewhere it can't be argued with. Strip away everything complicated people try to sell you about winning, and what's left is almost embarrassingly simple. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines, practiced every day. Not 50 new habits, a few. Repeated on the days you don't feel like it, which is most of them, for longer than feels reasonable, until one day it stops feeling like discipline, and starts feeling like who you are. That's the real finish line, if there is one. Not a moment where life gets easy. A point where the hard things you used to negotiate with yourself over every single morning just happen automatically. Because the version of you that wins isn't fighting himself anymore. He already won that argument a long time ago, on a day that felt completely unremarkable while it was happening. Go back to that river from the beginning of this video for a second. Nobody standing at the edge of it on any single afternoon ever saw a canyon being built. They just saw water doing what water does. Nothing dramatic. Nothing worth filming. The canyon only becomes visible to someone looking back after enough afternoons have piled up behind it. That's the part almost nobody has the patience for. Not the digging. The waiting to see what the digging was for. Picture yourself 10 years from where you're standing right now, looking back at this exact season of your life. One version of that future you is grateful, because this was the stretch where the small, boring corrections started. Another version of that future you is still telling the same story he's telling today, about how things will be different once conditions improve. Both versions are possible from where you're sitting. Only one of them takes any effort to reach. You already have what it takes, so that was never really the question. What matters is whether you're willing to keep making the unremarkable choice, the one nobody's filming, long enough for it to turn into the person other people eventually call lucky. The version of you that wins isn't sitting somewhere in the future waiting to be discovered. He's built, decision by decision, starting with the very next one you make after this video ends. Go build him.